It's time for the Red Zone Warriors Fantasy Football Show with Rob the Commish Smith, Jim the Jimmer Kiernan, and Jay Cushman Corson. Let's talk some fantasy football, boys.
Hi, and welcome to the Red Zone Warriors Fantasy Football Show. I am your host, Rob the Commish Smith, along here with my co-host, Jim the Jimmer Kiernan, and last but not least, our resident Lions fan, at least until the season begins, Jay Cushman Corsel. How are we doing today, guys?
Well, we're alive.
Hung the fuck over.
Yes, extremely.
Two of us are hungover. I will not point out which two, Jay and Jimmer. Okay, so tweet us your fantasy football questions at Red Zone Warriors. Anything you have to say, dynasty related, keeper related, going through mock drafts, wondering about strategy, would be happy to answer those for you. But we're going to go ahead and go into our news and notes sections as we do, and that is around the NFL, anything relevant that we feel you guys need to know about, and we call that Around the NFL with the Jimmer.
All right, let's begin in Denver. Adam Gase, Denver offensive coordinator, he said that Monty Ball made the most improvement over any player last year. That's because everyone else was over 40. Moving on, Chip Kelly's Eagles offense is trying to even quicken the pace from last year. They were at 23.4 seconds per play. They're trying to go faster this year. Thank you, Chip Kelly, and thank you for what you did to Oregon. Jermichael Finley has been cleared by his doctor who performed the neck surgery to resume his tight end career. Apparently the Patriots have reached out to him, and if Jermichael Finley decides not to play again because of that neck injury, he can actually cash in a $10 million policy.
Take the money.
Exactly, for all of our sakes. And back to Chip Kelly, he says Jerry Maclin has looked fantastic in OTAs off of his injury, and he's fully involved in every drill, which is good news for him, and he might go up some draft boards, people. Trent Richardson, who is absolutely worthless, and I hate him because he was on my team last year, he was limited in OTAs.
Trade.
Shocker. Yeah, he literally was – he's been limited. But he should be full participation by training camp, which means he will still average 1.9 yards per carry. Moving on, Ray Rice, the woman beater, is looking he's looking lighter and quicker in OTAs, which has nothing to do with his offensive line, which is still terrible, so he will still be crappy. Jim Harbaugh says Colin Kaepernick, who we'll get to, is the real breakout year in 2014, not to mention the fact that he also just got paid a massive amount of money. Watch out, Russell Wilson owners. Joe Lombardi, the new offensive coordinator of the Lions, says Stafford is picking up the new offense quickly and with ease, and that he is exceeding expectations. So apparently Stafford is not stupid. Puts us all at ease at night. Trey Mason, the new rookie for the Rams, said that the coaching staff told him he'd be competing for the starting running back role during training camp. Though he likely won't win it, but he could have a healthy role, taking a little bit out of Zach Stacy's bit on that horse. And tight end Vernon Davis is skipping OTA's, shocker, for going about $200,000 because we all can miss that because he's unhappy with contract. Speaking of skipping out on that, veteran Andre Johnson also skipped OTAs because he is unhappy with the team's QB situation, much like anyone else that roots for the Texans. And in other unrelated news, Jay went to a bachelor party yesterday. Back to you.
I'm dead.
Speaking of bit, is anyone else just upset that California Chrome or whatever his name is, did not win the Triple Crown? Because I, for one, am.
Yeah, my wife is heartbroken.
I'm upset.
Yeah, my bank account's hurting because of it, but
I lit a candle. Hasn't happened since before all of us were born, especially Jake, because he's old as hell. But yeah, just he got like tied for fourth. You know, I don't know. It was disheartening.
Lack of effort.
I cried a little, to be honest with you. So, all right. So as promised from last week, we're gonna kind of complete our kind of offensive starting rankings and so forth that we've been doing so far. You know, so we did running backs and wide receivers and so forth. We're gonna finish today with combining quarterbacks and tight ends. We're not going to discuss the headliners at these positions. It would just take too long. It's really not worth it, frankly. I mean, we know we don't need to know about Peyton Manning and Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers and Julius Thomas and Jimmy Graham and Vernon. These guys are studs. We know they're studs. We can look up their ADP. But we thought it'd be more helpful to our listening audience just to talk about kind of the mid-tier guys and what we think about them, what kind of value they could bring to your team, and so forth moving forward. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start with the quarterbacks and hit several of these guys kind of in the mid-tiers. And I'm going to start with Nick Foles. He's kind of controversial this year. His ADP right now at Fantasy Football Calculator is quarterback 6 off the board, going at the 603. I've got him at 9th, and I'll kind of explain, why that is. I'm going to back up just a little bit because a lot of people don't necessarily know a whole lot about Nick Foles except, what he did kind of the last half of the season last year. But he was a third-round draft pick by the Eagles in 2012 after playing for University of Arizona. So he's actually going into his third year this year in 2014. Didn't do squat his rookie season. He came in, he filled in for a hurt Michael Vick, and he just lit it up, and that is why his ADP is 6 currently. So do we believe that? Do we feel he can keep these numbers up? Is he worth a 6 QB off the board? Is he worth someone picking up in the 6th round? So let's just kind of review his numbers from last year. He started 10 games. Again, that's because Michael Vick got hurt, and in those 10 games, he had just under 3,000 passing yards. He had 27 passing touchdowns. He had 57 rushing attempts for 220 yards, so the guy can run when he needs to. And that was about 3.9 yards attempt, which was about twice what Trent Richardson put up, as Jimmer pointed out earlier in the news and notes.
Too soon.
And he also put up 3 rushing touchdowns, so that definitely helped his fantasy value. In Week 9 of last year, he became the second NFL quarterback to post a perfect passing rating of 158.3 while passing for more than 400 yards, and he was the first NFL quarterback to post a perfect passing rating, throwing 7 touchdowns in a single game. I mean, that was just unbelievable. It was almost too good to be true, but it did actually happen. I watched that game. It was pretty amazing. So he also holds the best TD to interception ratio ever. Granted, he just played those 10 games, but that's a 27 touchdown to 2 interception ratio, which was amazing. He did lead the Eagles to their first division title in 3 years, and again, that was as a sophomore, and again, that was having not played at all his rookie season nor the first 6 games of last year. So that was pretty significant. Very impressive numbers. He had an NFL best 9.12 yards per attempt. Again, he had Deshaun Jackson last year, which he won't have this year. And he had a high 64% completion rate, which was 6th in the NFL. That's higher than quarterbacks like Peyton Manning and such that were second, below him. So he had all that to say, he had an incredible season last year in the 10 games that he did play. The Eagles felt confident with him moving forward that not only did they get rid of Michael Vick, they did nothing in free agency from a quarterback perspective that would suggest that Nick Foles will not be the clear number 1 starter. I mean, that was huge to me. I was really wondering if they would do something in the draft. They did not. That cements him in my mind as their number 1 starter. I think that's just a foregone conclusion that that's going to happen. Chip Kelly, as we know, runs a fast, up-tempo offense. It's very productive. They get a ton of plays off. The more plays that you get off, the more chances that these offensive players have for making points for our fantasy teams. He does still have a plethora of offensive weapons there, including, oh, by the way, the rushing leader of 2013, one Mr. LaShawn McCoy. So although, under no circumstances do I think he can maintain that incredible TD to interception ratio that he had. I think the indicators that he did prove to us with all those records that I just mentioned proves that his success will be able to continue. My main concern for Nick Foles and why I have him ninth, which is below the ADP, is because I think they're going to be, they lost Deshaun Jackson. He was definitely the downfield threat. And I think there's a lot of pressure this year on Jeremy Maclin. He just had a scare in OTAs with his knee, but everything's fine. No issues there to worry about. But if Jeremy Maclin goes down, there's not a whole lot of guys behind him. He's got Riley Cooper and rookies essentially behind him. So, obviously LaShawn McCoy is there, Darren Sproles is there, but from a sheer passing perspective, my concern with Nick Foles is he can't maintain that ratio. He won't be as efficient, and if Maclin goes down, he might be in trouble with putting up numbers. So I've got him at solid at number 9. I think he's probably a guy that you could definitely stream, no doubt about it. And if you want to risk him as your QB1, I really couldn't argue with that. So at the end of the day, I see him with about 3,900 passing yards, playing a full 16 games. I see him with just under 30 touchdowns. Interceptions, of course, will go up. I've got him at 9 interceptions, 250 rushing yards, and about 2 rushing TDs, putting him at number 9 in a QB ranking for 2014.
Yeah, Nick Foles, I've also got him a little lower than what his ADP is. I've got him at 10th. He's not a guy I'm going to be targeting just because I don't think he can keep up production he had last year. I think him losing Deshaun Jackson hurts him a lot, just as much as I think as it helps RG3. Jim, I know you're a Chip Kelly fan, so let's hear the gospel.
Oh, okay, all right. First of all, the whole Deshaun Jackson. Let me debunk that theory for you right now. Deshaun Jackson had 200-yard games, all right, during the Nick Foles era. Are you kidding me? He didn't even like the guy. He didn't even throw it to him. So, okay, that goes way out the window. In their passing scheme and in their offense, their spread option offense, which is actually kind of oriented towards passing, it actually goes in favor to shorter passes, okay? Let me reiterate that. It goes towards shorter passes. So that means that, hey, Deshaun Jackson's not going to miss him. Jerry Maclin, he is more of a slot kind of guy. He's quick, and he's going to catch a shit ton of passes this year. But those wide receivers, and by the way, you're way off in his rushing yards. I mean, the dude easily can rush for 500 yards, being as white and as gangly as he is. I mean, those are accidental yards, quite frankly. And by the way, the TDs, that's one of the biggest and easiest things for Chip Kelly to do to exploit in the defense is having a naked bootleg for a quarterback off a fake option. So just saying he's going to get more rushing touchdowns, he's going to get more rushing yards than you think. Passing yards are probably accurate, and yes, I totally agree. He probably can keep that same consistency level that he had last year because that was unreal, quite frankly.
Well, so Jimmer's clearly high on Nick Foles. He has him at number 6 overall. The fact that he's white, I don't think has any implication on his rushing yards except for the fact that they may go down. I mean, Steve Young was probably, the last guy who could rush for anything more than 250 yards on the field from a white boy perspective. But, I don't know. The guy, he kind of came out of nowhere. Well, he did come out of nowhere, frankly, and he only played 10 games. It wasn't a new offense. I do feel comfortable with him. I still have him in the top 10, but it's just one of those guys for me that I just don't feel, if I draft him, if he falls and falls and falls, I get him in the 8th round, and, I might feel pretty good about that. Might I back him up with somebody else like the Red Rocket, Andy Dalton, or somebody? I might feel I need to, but if he produces even, with a 25% deduction from what he did last year, he would definitely maintain what you need from a fantasy perspective and quarterback points. So we're going to go ahead and move along from one Mr. Nick Foles to a guy, RG3. RG3, he is all over the place. People do not know what to think of him. They don't know what to expect from him from coming from one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen since Cam Newton to completely shitting the bed last year for very valid reasons, to being 100%, and what could he possibly do. I know that the Cushman and I are very high on him. We have him both at 6, and Jimmer is ridiculously having him at the 15th overall quarterback position, which is embarrassing for me to actually say out loud on the air, quite frankly. So before we let the Jimmer defend himself and his ridiculous ranking of RG3. Jay, what do we have to say about RG3 moving into 2014?
Well, he's not going to be 15th. I know that. I have him 6th overall. The first thing we need to say about RG3 is the fact that Deshaun Jackson's arrival in Washington, well, it's good news for a lot of the guys there. I think it's the best news for RG3. You know, like Jim said, the guy's not the greatest receiver in the world, but he does stretch defenses with his speed, the deep threat. So, you know, between Jackson and Pierre Garçon, I think the Redskins suddenly have one of the more dynamic receiving duels in the league. You throw in Jordan Reed and Jay Gruden taking over as the main man on the offense, and I think it really puts Griffin into the starting fantasy quarterback conversation. Gruden's known for running a version of the West Coast offense. It calls for quick passing decisions, you know, a few deep shots thrown in there. So I think that helps with RG3 not throwing interceptions too much. You know, Gruden loves to throw the ball. He ordered well over 1,500 passing attempts, including 516 per season in Cincinnati. So between Griffin having a nice solid run up down there in Washington, D.C., I doubt Gruden's really going to be shy about letting Griffin chuck the ball down the field. So my projection for RG3 is 3,800 passing yards, 450 rushing yards, 31 total touchdowns. I think he stands out as a quarterback with 300-point-plus potential in fantasy. So I think it definitely puts him in close to the top 5 in passers this year for sure.
Jimmer, before you respond to this, let me just say, from someone who hates Phillip Rivers and someone who believes that Phillip Rivers has these on and off again years like we've never seen in NFL history, last year was clearly an on year. You have Phillip Rivers ranked as 10, and you have RG3 ranked as 15. So please explain that in your explanation as to why RG3 is 15th in your rankings.
Absolutely. Well, let me start with RG3. His offensive line is the problem, all right? I have no doubt about his skill, his arm, his accuracy. He's actually a very accurate quarterback. Problem is he makes just stupid moves with his legs, all right? That's how he gets hurt, is when he's rushing the ball. And quite frankly, his offensive line cannot protect him. So, yes, by all means, you guys can have him. He has all the skill sets to be a top 10 quarterback, but unfortunately he doesn't have the team to be a top 10 quarterback, all right? That's the big difference there. So that's why I'm very negative on him, because honestly that offensive line is just shit. They literally asked me to start for him at one point. All right, and as far as Phillip Rivers goes, dude, that guy has more ups and downs than a roller coaster at Disneyland, all right? He's terrible, okay? But he also has a couple little new toys to play with over there, and he actually has a decent offensive line, which I will continue to say is a big effing deal.
I see. Well, I'm actually looking up the Redskins' offensive line rankings last year as we speak, and I'm clearly stalling in order to do that. And dude, not to throw you under the bus, bro, but according to fantasy or football, Pro Football Focus, Washington Redskins were ranked 5th last year in offensive line. So
yeah,
maybe
last year. What did they do this year?
Well, we don't know because they haven't started yet, but we'll see.
No. What did they do this year?
As far as
that is not the same squad, and that's why I'm saying that.
Okay. Well, then that could very well be. This is my thing on RG3. I'm also very high on this guy. This was RG3. He came out in the rookie season. He finished 5th as a rookie, which was probably, I don't remember what Cam Newton did as a rookie, but he was probably top 5 as well. It was great. He's coming off a full season, which he did not have going into his sophomore year. He hurt his ACL. He had to sit out of OTAs. He had to basically sit out of training camp and just ride a bike on the sidelines. He wasn't allowed to have that chemistry with his wide receivers and so forth. That was not this year. He's going in 100% healthy, not going to be having to do the knee brace. He's going to have all this time with his offensive weapons to get that chemistry down. They've added weapons. They added Deshaun Jackson, as we talked about. Jordan Reed is at least healthy for game 1. That's the most we can say about Jordan Reed at this point, but he is. The running game will probably be better because of Deshaun Jackson. Alfred Morris is obviously a good running back and what he needs to do. I just think the guy, especially being able to get him at the 7-1, which is where he's going right now in 12-man leagues, is an incredible value. The guy can still get it done with his legs. I think this is a guy that I absolutely would target, and I recommend our listeners to target this guy in the 7th through 10th round, and I really, really, really do not think he is going to let anyone down in 2014.
Absolutely. RG3. The president.
RG3 president. All right, so we're going to get off our RG3 bandwagon, and we are going to move to another guy that had an off year last year to no fault of his own, and this is one Mr. Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is going currently 9th in ADP, 9th quarterback off the board, kind of towards the latter end of the 7th round. So, Jimmer, what do you think about Matt Ryan? Obviously, he lost some weapons last year. Julio Jones went out early. He had some injuries he was dealing with. You still have Tony Gonzalez and so forth, but he lost him. So what do we think about him moving in 2014? And is this a guy that you feel comfortable drafting at the latter part of the 7th round like ADP suggests?
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys, if he falls into your lap and you haven't picked up a quarterback yet because you didn't get one of the big three, I think he's an absolute steal. I think last year the Atlanta Falcons just sucked. Let's be honest. I can't fully blame Matt Ryan, Matty Ice for that, but I think Tony Gonzalez said it best, and Tony Gonzalez said, hey, he's not elite, all right, but he's very close. He's right on that cusp. He definitely needs guys around him to elevate his overall game, which is something you got to kind of think about. Like, wait a second, so if you have all the tools, he can make all the right calls, all right? So statistically, I mean, yeah, last year he was down in everything, across the board. But let's look at why. I mean, Julio Jones was gone. Roddy White was hurt for a while, which Roddy White never actually gets hurt. Steven Jackson, by the way, you kind of brought him in, paid him a lot of money to basically perform, and he didn't, which is something you should come to expect from Oregon State. They just don't perform. And so anyway, my point is that he's got all those things back now. All right, so he's honestly, with all those tools and talents coming back, I gotta believe that his fantasy value will go up. However, there's a couple new guys that came into the fold. Andrew Luck, I think, is right there on that cusp of elite. Andy Dalton, honestly, we'll get into him later, but he had a fluke of a year, and he was so good. But a couple of those other guys kind of jumped him, quite frankly, and I think Atlanta just tied themselves to him perhaps a little bit too soon. But he is, without a doubt, in my mind, he's a top 10 guy. And so I think, yeah, he's right around that 4,500 yards category. I think he'll pass for over 30 TDs. Obviously, he doesn't do much rushing, so I wouldn't worry about that. But he is consistently able to get you for that 12-man league. He's definitely draftable. In fact, it would be stupid for someone not to draft him. And more importantly, I think in that 7th round, you're not really taking a risk. You just know what you're going to get. So with that, I'll turn it over to you guys and let you guys harp on me all you want, haters.
No, actually, I agree with you. I have Matt Ryan one spot lower than you in 9th, but I think the guy's got the talent, and I think he's got the weapons. As long as Julio stays healthy, Roddy stays on the field, this guy is going to be throwing the ball around like crazy. Hopefully Steven Jackson can give us something better than he did last year. I mean, I loved this guy when he was in St. Louis, yeah, and he would run people over. I remember watching him play the Lions and just being like, oh, man, this guy's just killing us. And last year he was just awful. I don't know what his deal was. But so, yeah, I would definitely take Matt Ryan in the late 7th round. Hopefully he drops a little bit and you can get him in the 8th. But 7th round is definitely a draftable spot for this guy.
Well, and Jay, let me just mention too. I mean, a lot of people I've listened to and read about. I mean, they're all in on Matt Ryan again, and the reason is this. I mean, Matt Ryan, 2010 he finished 8th in quarterback rankings. 2011 he finished 8th in quarterback rankings. 2012 he finished 7th. I mean, the guy's been consistently, except for last year when he had all these injuries he had to deal with, he's been a consistent top 7, top 8 guy. So he's a guy that you can pick in later rounds, that you can rely on. You don't have to stream him with other guys. He's not being drafted till the 9th, at least at this point. an ADP somewhere in the 7th round, so he's safe. You know, everybody's coming back who's healthy. Yes, they lost Tony Gonzalez. There's the question mark there at tight end, but Julio Jones is a lot better than Tony Gonzalez, at least as a down-the-field threat. As good as Tony Gonzalez was and Hall of Fame and all that stuff, that's just a fact. I am a little concerned with their running game. You know, Steven Jackson is getting older and older, and not sure how I feel about him as a running back going in this year. He seemed to, you know, he's hurt quite a bit, so I'm a little concerned on the running back thing. But as far as just Matty Ice throwing the ball, I think he's a safe pick. And if I can't get my beloved RG3, I will definitely settle for Matt Ryan and feel pretty comfortable doing so.
Well, okay, Rob, speaking about young guys that could jump, let's go with Colin Kaepernick. I mean, he just signed that massive contract. Most money ever guaranteed at $61.5 million. All right, so what do we got with Cap?
Yeah, well, let's get into that, because that sounds a lot better than in actuality it actually is. So I'm glad you brought that up. This is the deal, and I am not a sports agent. I am not an attorney. You know, none of that. But I did read into what those guys who do know what they're talking about, how they broke down this actual contract. He, like you said, Jimmer, he signed a 6-year, $126 million contract with $61 million guaranteed, quote unquote. But it is really truly not. I mean, a lot of these contracts aren't truly what they appear to be on the headlines. It is not truly $161 million guaranteed. I'm not going to sit here and take the time to break down all the reasons why, but essentially, and you can look it up yourself, but from what I read, this is a very, very San Francisco 49ers, what they call team-friendly contract.
They can cut him.
Yeah, and he's getting about $12 million up front. I mean, he definitely has enough money to go out and buy another pet tortoise. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But the fact is, you know, comparing his numbers to some of these elite guys and his guaranteed money, there's so many different, if he does this, he gets this, if he shows up for this, or he gets this. So it's not as big as it might appear, but the bottom line is the guy has done well. He's brought him to the verge of the Super Bowl 2 straight years, NFC Championship game. He deserves to get paid. They paid him, but he could leave next year and sign a whopping contract with somebody else for much better guaranteed money that's more legit as far as what I've read online. But outside of that, how do I feel about Kaepernick in general? Well, Kaepernick is the 11th quarterback going off the board, so lower than any of the other guys that we've talked about so far. He's going at the beginning of the 8th round. I actually have him as at 7th. Cushman, Jay has him at 11, and so does Jimmer have him at 11. So I'm a little higher on him than the rest. You know, he finished as the 11th last year, 3,200 yards, 21 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. He rushed 92 times for 524 yards, which was 5.7 yards per attempt, which was higher than any running back last year. Andre Ellington was the highest running back from a rush per attempt. He blew him out. Well, he didn't blow him out of the water. I think Andre was 5.2 or 5.5. Anyway, when he runs the ball, he runs it very well. Let's just put it there. He ran for 4 rushing touchdowns. Jim Harbaugh, for those of you who would clearly, I guess, know nothing about the NFL football, as the coach for the 49ers, he expects Harbaugh to have a real breakout year. I mean, he's quoted as saying he just has the look and feel that he's going to break out more than he already has. Is that coach speak? Abso-freaking-lutely it is. That's what coaches do, but that doesn't mean it's not true. I've watched Kaepernick for the last, couple seasons that he's played, that he's had the starting position. He definitely has it. There's optimism. I mean, the guy's got all sorts of firepower around him. He's going to have Crabtree back for a full season this coming year, which is tremendous. If you listen to our previous podcast about wide receivers, I let you guys know that out of all the attempts that Kaepernick threw in 2012, 51% of those targets went to Crabtree. So he loves the guy. And actually, this is an interesting stat. In the last 18 games with Michael Crabtree healthy and on the field in the lineup, Kaepernick averaged 20.9 fantasy points per game, which equates to number 3 quarterback numbers. and he's going to have him 100% healthy for all of 2014. So that's why I'm a little bit higher on him. They, of course, still have Vernon Davis. The guy's probably the most athletic tight end, just from an athletic ability perspective, with even Jimmy Graham and talking about those guys out there. He's got Anquan Bolden still, who's a beast. They added Stevie Johnson, which is still just another downfield threat. And, of course, they have Kaepernick's legs, and that's a big part of his game besides his arm. So, San Francisco defense, we've heard in the news they've taken a bit of a hit from a legal standpoint, which is what happens when you go through an airport and you say something about bomb or weapons or whatnot. Bad things happen. But regardless, the red flag for Kaepernick is that he's on the 49ers. I mean, they're a rush-oriented team. They pound the ball with Frank Gore, even though he's 77 years old, and they conservatively go down the field and they win they typically win with defense. Their passing, they were actually second to last in passing percentages in 2013 at just about 45%. So that's the negative, but he has so many positives going into this season. It's another full season for him in this offense. He's got Crabtree back. I see Kaepernick as passing for 3,700 yards. I think he approaches 30 touchdowns. I see him rushing for 500 yards because that's what he does, and probably rushing for 4 touchdowns. So I've got him ranked as the 7th quarterback going into 2014.
Yeah, I don't not that high on Colin Kaepernick or the 49ers offense this year. I mean, yeah, they've got some good receivers. I just think they run the ball too much for this guy to break the top 10 very easily. And they have a huge stable of running backs over there right now, so it's not like if one of them goes down, he's going to get more passing attempts because of it. So I've got him at 11th. There's guys I'd rather take than Colin Kaepernick that are going in that same area. And we'll talk about them a little bit later. But Jim, what do you think of Kaepernick?
I'm right there with you. In my opinion, a top 10 quarterback's got to at least throw for 4,000 yards. And Rob, you even said it. I mean, he's not going to do that. So that's my big thing with that. I mean, like Jay said, I mean, it's a rushing offense. I mean, it's very ball control oriented, and when you have something like that, I mean, it's very tough for him to do otherwise. I think having Crabtree back is definitely going to help him. I think he'll definitely be better. But I think, Rob, like you said, his breakout year is 3,700 yards passing. Like, really? I mean, I'm pretty sure Peyton did that in the first quarter of the season. So.
Well, no, I mean, I agree. 3,700 is not tremendous. However, he's also a rushing QB, which a lot of these other guys are not. I mean, Phillip Rivers, or Andy Dalton, whatever, those guys threw for like 4,300 yards, but they don't run for shit. So I think that adds a different dynamic. Plus, you got to remember in fantasy scoring, they're going to get a point for every 10 yards that they rush versus getting a point for every 20 to 25 yards that they throw. So I think that's what makes up the difference there for me for Kaepernick. But anyway, we can move along from Kaepernick and move over to Andy Dalton. This is an interesting one. I mean, we kind of mentioned the Red Rocket a little bit earlier. I mean, God, what do you do with Andy Dalton? I mean, this guy just seemingly, I mean, we all know he's been in the league for a while, comes out of nowhere, and he's like a top 5, top 6 quarterback, depending on your scoring system, and no one saw coming. And then that's great and all, but do you trust it? What do you do with him next year? How confident do you feel as him being your QB1? So, Jay, after doing all the research that I know you did on Andy Dalton, and I know you played him against me in the finals last season, and he scored you like 30-something points, and it was an amazing play on your point, even though you still lost. What do you think about?
Sorry.
What do you think about the Red Rocket, and would you feel comfortable? I mean, his ADP is 17th. So clearly he has great value if you feel like he can outproduce that going in the 12th round.
Absolutely. I have him as 7th overall. Look, this guy finished 5th overall last season in our league. And everybody was questioning whether he had value as a fantasy starter all season long. Don't be that guy this year. The Red Rocket threw for 33 touchdowns. He had a 2 on the ground last year. That was good. That was good for 3rd most in the league. And he completed 62% of his passes for 4,300 yards. I mean, the guy's accurate. He doesn't throw a ton of picks. Giovanni Bernard is taking an increasing role in this offense this year, which seems very likely. He should see a ton more receptions. His dynamic skill set as a receiver is only going to inflate Dalton's numbers this year. So, he's going to be a freaking great quarterback. So if you can get him at a reasonable price, which, I'm looking at ADPs going in the 13th round, I mean, yeah, I would definitely feel comfortable waiting on a quarterback, taking Dalton late, and maybe backing him up with somebody. But I think he's going to be a top 5. It's going to happen. Definitely top 10 though. But you guys, I know you have him way down the list, so let's hear why I'm a moron.
I'll start real quick by saying Jay Gruden's gone. I don't doubt what you're saying, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. My only thing is I got to see what their offense is going to do here before I can really trust and draft him at 7th. So that's just the big difference I have there. That's why I'm taking a very pessimistic approach. He's someone I think you could pick up the waivers, quite frankly.
Andy Dalton, what to do with you? Going into it, what is he going into his? Was it 4th year, Jay, or 5th year? Yeah.
4th year.
4th year. He's never finished inside the top 12 prior to last year, I believe, if the numbers that I looked up are accurate. So I see it more as an aberration than anything. They do have a new offensive coordinator there, as the Jimmer mentioned. I think they're going to run the ball more, frankly. That's what this guy brings to the table. They drafted Hill as a rookie. I think him and Gio are going to run the crap out of the ball. Yes, they have A.J. Green. They have options there. But it's just this guy, to come from where he went to do what he did last year, you can't assume that's going to happen again. And it's one of those guys where might he do it? Absolutely, I guess. But the chances are, history says, numbers say, statistics say that won't happen again. And I'm surely not comfortable with drafting him, as a QB1, especially, within a top 7 pick as you have him. For me, and what I do quite a bit actually in my fantasy drafting strategy is I'll like to stream quarterbacks. I think Andy Dalton is a fantastic guy to pick up in later rounds. Good Lord, current ADP right now in Fantasy Football Calculator has him going at the beginning of the 12th round. We're thinking about. Defenses would have gone by then. At least Seattle would have probably in all likelihood. So, if you're going to stream quarterbacks and you can grab a Jay Cutler, you can grab an Andy Dalton, I think that's great. You play matchups with him. But all in all, just from his history and the years that he's been in the league, I can't trust him. But I would definitely feel comfortable streaming him and sleep pretty well at night doing that. So.
Yeah, to clarify, I'm not saying I would draft him in the 7th overall. I would take him late and reap the benefits at the end of the season.
Well, and just to clarify for the audience, that's a great point. Basically, Jay's saying, he thinks he's going to, at the end of 2014, he's going to produce the 7th position as far as fantasy point numbers, which makes him even more of a value for Jay than it would be for me, because I don't value him that high. But if he produces top 7 and Jay can get him in the 12th, that is just amazing value, and chances are he's going to do very well in the league. That's just how that works. So, all right, so we're going to move on to another very polarizing guy, which is interesting because this guy has never been polarizing. Cam Newton has always been a top 5 guy. It was a no-brainer. It doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter who he throws the ball to. It doesn't matter which way the wind is blowing, where he's playing, what his running back situation is, who his wide receivers are. He runs the ball. He runs in touchdowns. He ends up as top 5, even if he's starts off slow like he has done in previous years. He ends up kicking ass the second half of the season, and he ends up top 5. That's just what he does. Jimmer has him as a possible keeper this year. I think he is going to keep him. But his ADP, instead of being top 5, which it has been since his sophomore season, is now 10. He's fallen big time. You can get the guy clearly at the end of the 7th round which to some seems ridiculous and others seems right on the mark. So Jim, as a keeper of him, as someone you've had years in the past, what do you think about his production, and are you a believer that he's going to fall off the map like the majority of these so-called experts think?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's face it, Super Scam Cam, the Newton man. Let me just put this out there right now. He actually just threw a pass to me on his nationwide Find a Wide Receiver tour. He has no one to throw to. So let's get the obvious thing out of the way. I mean, Steve is gone. I mean, any other wide receiver he had there is gone. But quite frankly, were any of them that good? You kind of got to start thinking about that. We'll talk about Greg Olsen in a minute here. Hint, hint, wink, wink. I think that guy is going to have a huge year just because of what everything's going on. The rookie, I talked about him a week or two ago, Kelvin Benjamin. I think that guy has serious upside, and I think that's a lot of potential for Cam to still perform. I think they have 14 running backs or 17 running backs, and I think a lot of them are going to catch a lot of balls this year, which is something different. But what does this really mean for his run production during those read option plays? I think he's going to be running a lot more rather than passing while scrambling. He apparently is bonding with Calvin, like I mentioned. And again, like, that guy is big. I mean, he's a huge target. And Cam's not exactly the most accurate passer, but he definitely can get the ball in the region. And that was something that Steve excelled at, was just catching the ball. Making the play to get to it, and I think that's something that Kelvin also has at him. So I think we're going to see a lot of hybrid roles coming out of the running backs. I think you're going to see a guy like John Barner out of Oregon. Yes, I'm going there. Jonathan Stewart's from Oregon too. Anyways. I think you're going to see actually the comeback of the Z-back in this offense, because quite frankly they have to do something, and I think that's what'll be kind of a trick there. So good news is for dynasty owners is that, hey, the guy doesn't get hurt. I mean, the guy's a rock of consistency when it comes to that, which is kind of scary to say about him, but he doesn't get hurt. He just keeps putting up numbers no matter what happens, no matter what the situation is. He's truly and without doubt a warrior competitor. I mean, the guy, no matter what, finds a way to win. I got to be honest, having him on my team last year, I wasn't ever expecting a 40-point game from him, fantasy points wise, where you just hope you have one crazy game. He just kept putting up 20s, just like it was no big deal. And I mean, it made no sense either, because literally he'd have 200 passing yards, maybe 80 yards rushing, and probably 2 TDs, and he's just a rock of consistency. Yeah. I think he's going to do what it takes to keep winning, and so that's why, in my opinion, he's still a top 10 guy. I don't know if he's a top 5 guy like he has been in the last few years, but he's still definitely a top 10 guy in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in here, Jay, and let you have the last word on Cam. So Cam had the best completed percentage that he's had in his career last year. Let's start with the positives. Granted, he wasn't known for his accuracy in throwing the ball. Another reason why I like the fact that they got Benjamin, because he's a huge guy and he can throw it 6 feet in either direction of him and he can still catch the ball, because he's not known as the most accurate guy. But regardless, he's improved in that category as a quarterback. And again, last year, how did he finish in quarterback rankings? He finished 5th, because he always finishes 5th or better. Now, let's go to the negatives. His passing yards are both down. His rushing TDs down. So rushing yards, passing yards, rushing TDs are down his 3 straight years in a row. That's not great. That doesn't give me warm fuzzies. That's why I have him ranked at 10. It's not because of this whole wide receiver debacle, which I think people are making way too much of. It's because those 3 categories are down. The guy is a winner. Obviously, he's been doing it since college. Yes, he's healthy. He doesn't miss a game because he's so big and huge. I don't think he can be hurt if he tried. And people, they keep bringing up this he's got no wide receivers to throw to. Oh, dear God, he lost Steve Smith. What is he going to do? Good Lord, people, it's Steve freaking Smith. He's been in the league for like 17 years. Steve Smith's numbers last year were the worst that they've been probably in his entire career. he's not losing Josh Gordon. He's not losing Calvin Johnson. He lost Steve Smith. It's not that big of a deal. Last year, this was his receiving core. Steve Smith, Ted Ginn, Brandon LaFell. Not exactly world beaters. Who does he have this year? He's got Jericho Cotchery, Jason Avant, Kelvin Benjamin, the healthy Greg Olson. Is one better than the other? I would suggest that maybe this year might be better than last year. So I'm not buying all this wide receiver stuff. Oh, my God, he's got no one to throw to, but he's going to throw it up to himself and run under and catch the ball like we see on YouTube. No, I really don't think that's the issue. The reason I have him down, again, is because his rushing numbers have been down, passing numbers have been down, even though he's been more accurate, and his rushing touchdowns have been down. So I don't really know what to do with Cam Newton, to be honest with the listeners here. I have brought him down from where I would have had him in previous years. Maybe I'm being influenced by the likes of other folks talking about him, but I still think he's a top 10 guy, and I am not getting caught up in all this wide receiver and lack thereof controversy because he's never had a good wide receiver core.
Yeah, you can say that. You can have him. I have him outside the top 15, which may be a little low, but I don't think he's going to be top 10. He doesn't have anybody to throw the ball to. He just doesn't. It's not going to be a good year for Cam Newton. You got him in dynasty leagues, hold on to him. I'm sure they'll fix the problem there. But I just don't see it. But anyway, we're going to move on. And this is a guy I don't even really want to talk about, and not because I have anything personal against him, but just because he plays for the Buccaneers. Jay Cutler. His ADP is the 14th overall quarterback. Rob, you have him at 11th. How dare you? I feel like I'm being betrayed by my friend that you actually have this guy above his ADP. Placate me and at least give me a good reason for it.
Yes, another polarizing figure, Jay Cutler. What do you do with a guy who's got the best wide receiver tandem in the NFL? Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey. Top 3, top 4 running back in the NFL, Matt Forte. He's got to be up there. That opens things up for everybody. You're right. He's going as 14, quarterback off the board. You get him in the 10th round. I've got him at 11th, and it's just because the freaking quarterbacks are so deep. I just don't know where to put these guys. There's just so much good talent. That's where I have him. But let's look at his numbers. So last year, he played 10 games, and that's the problem with Cutler. Is he gets hurt. That's just been his history of his career. But last year in the 10 games that he did play with the frowny face that he always plays with, which is annoying to me, he had over 2,600 yards. He had a completion percentage of over 63%, which puts him, it's kind of middle of the road. 19 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 118 rushing yards, which actually surprised me a little bit. That's probably because his offensive line wasn't, tremendous. But if you project, this is the big thing going around. If you guys listen to XM Sirius Radio, which I listen to a lot of podcasts, what you've probably heard, as I have, is that if you put Cutler's numbers combined with the journeyman McCown's numbers over 16 games last season, obviously McCown is not with the Bears anymore. He's over at Tampa Bay. Those two guys would have finished third in fantasy points as quarterback. That's just a fact. That's what the numbers bear out, and that's, again, because they have Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, Matt Forte, Martellus Bennett. But I don't give a crap about McCown because we're talking about Jay Cutler and what he's going to do. So let's project Jay Cutler's numbers out from the 10 games he did play to 16 games. I know that's hard to do. That's sketchy, because he could have shit the bed the last 5 games for whatever reason and sucked, and so these numbers could potentially mean nothing. But if you do project them out, as we do, Cutler would have finished 6th in the NFL as quarterbacks in the standard quarterback scoring for fantasy football. That's number 6. The problem is he doesn't play 16 games, okay? So that's the biggest concern, is about durability. He had both a growing problem, not from a height perspective, but that's down in his man region. He had ankle issues. He hasn't played 16 games since, wait for it, 2009. Yes, 2009 is the last time he actually played a full 16
Was that
games.
when he was with the Broncos?
I mean, that's so long ago.
I think
I'd
it was
have
the
to-
contract year, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. So he did. Now, this is the upside. He did sign a big deal. They signed him to a big deal this offseason. They got rid of their journeyman McCown, who lit the crap up out of the freaking football when he did get in there for those 6 games that he played. And they didn't do much in the draft for him. So he's clearly the number 1 starter. They're going into the second year of Mark Trestman's offense. And for those of you who don't, follow this to the extent that us degenerates do, Mark Trestman is known as one of the best offensive masterminds in the game. So they're going into their second year of this with some of the best weapons in the league. That is the upside, the positives of Jay Cutler. I see him at the end of the season at 4,100. This is kind of factoring in the fact that I don't think he's going to play full 16 games, but 4,100 passing yards, 30 touchdowns. The guy does throw interceptions. We know that. I've got him at 15 interceptions. So I've got him at 11, and I've got him at 11 again because I don't think he's going to play 16 games. I think Cutler is probably the premier target for somebody who decides to wait and stream quarterbacks, which I and the rest of us, I believe, is the way to go in fantasy football in the modern era. You can get him in the 10th round. You draft him. You draft the Red Rocket, somebody else later. You stream them based on matchups because when Cutler does play, he's going to give you elite fantasy numbers. And once he pulls his groin and tweaks his ankle again and he pouts off the field like he does, then you can plug somebody else in and you can still do very well in your fantasy leagues.
Yeah, 2 words to describe Jay Cutler: whiny bitch. I don't like the guy. He's got to face a Lions defensive line that pretty much tries to kill him every time they see him, twice a year. I don't think he's going to last 16 games. You're right. Definitely worth a stream, like you said, but I've got him down at 14th. I don't see him being much of a factor once he gets injured. So Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey are going to have to catch passes from whoever the backup there is. And that's all there is to it. So,
Yeah,
no Jay.
Jay, I'm exactly with you. I mean, injury is the primary concern. Quite frankly, the dude's on his back a lot, and I will keep harping on this. Their offensive line is not good.
Yeah. Well, guys, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't think he's going to last 16 games either, but the stats bear themselves out. He would have finished 6th on his own. He would have finished 3rd if you combine the numbers. So when he is playing, because of his weapons and the situation that he is in with Mark Trestman, he's a clear starter when he's on the field and playing, which he will be doing at least the first part of the season until Ndamukong Suh rips out his larynx and feeds it to him. So I'm not sure what week that's going to happen, so you might want to look that up. So we're going to move on to a guy I frankly had nothing personal against Mr. Tom Brady until last year. I mean, we can all admit it. The guy is, he's a stud. He's a Hall of Famer. He's got a beautiful wife. I would question his attire at times, especially during the Kentucky Derby. I've got nothing personal against him. Last year, we'll get into this later. But so Jimmer, you're tasked with talking about Tom Brady. His ADP is 7th. People aren't really sure what to do about him. His name recognition is what it is, and it's tremendous. But he's now ADP 7. He's going in the very end of the 6th round in a 12-man league. You've got him at 8th, just below his current ADP. He's coming off one of the worst seasons he's ever had outside of the year that he tore his ACL in Game 1 like 5 years ago or whatever it was. So what do you think about Tom, and are you comfortable drafting him as I unfortunately did last year, or are you staying away?
Let's take care of a few things first here. He's old, all right. Tom, I don't know if he's going to make it through the full season. ESPN just ran a thing, and they officially said that he is out of the elite category. And I'm honestly kind of depressed talking about him. But seriously, it's kind of getting boring. But anyways, let's talk about a few things. One, those wide receivers, they only can get better, quite frankly. I mean, there's no way they're going to drop 45 or 55 balls, whatever they did. It was ridiculous. Gronk is back until Gronk gets hurt, which is just a matter of time. I'm sure he's injured right now, in a Las Vegas, pool party. His offensive line, though, and like I said, I keep harping on this, it's 8 deep. 8-man rotation deep. Like, that's huge. And these guys are all veterans, I mean, we're talking probably the best offensive unit in the game, all right? Like, that's impressive. There's 4 teams that we could talk about year in, year out, and this is probably a whole nother discussion, but I'll say it anyways. There's 4 teams right now that are just automatic Super Bowl contenders, and that's San Francisco, Seattle, Broncos, and the Patriots. And why are the Patriots a factor? Because they have Tom motherfucking Brady, all right? All right, Tom Ugg Boots Brady. We'll say that. I got it out there. So I'm officially, spoiler alert, I'm officially putting him on my IR watch list because I think he could get hurt this year. But the reason why I have him so high is because it's Tom Brady, man. Like, he just keeps doing what he does, and it doesn't make sense, and he just keeps going through. Like, yes, last year was rough, but I just, something inside of me says, dude, the guy's going to end up top 10 again. And I have no idea how to explain it. I have no idea why, but it's just one of those things where he's the unicorn of fantasy football, in my opinion.
Yeah, Tom Brady, I have him at 7th because it's Tom Brady. I mean, he had a down year last year. Like him from his wide receiver, dropped a shit ton of balls. I think they're going to get better. Hopefully Gronk stays healthy longer this year. I just got to say, though, I remember you, Rob, you thought that was the pick of the draft, and you got him. I'm so damn excited. I thought you were going to whip it out and start roster baiting right there in the restaurant bar thing we were at in Vegas. I thought we were going to get arrested. I mean, there was a cop there. I believe he had Jim in handcuffs at one point.
That did happen.
So, yeah, dude, Tom Brady is going to be a top 10 quarterback this year. Julian Edelman is going to be his little helper, I think. I hope. I want Julian Edelman back again this year.
Yes, let me just say, I have no shame for drafting Tom Brady last year in the 7th round whatsoever. It was a fantastic pick. I would have done it.
No, it wasn't.
It absolutely was, and I would have done it again and again in those circumstances. I thought it was at the time. At the time, I think it was the pick of the draft. I was roster baiting. You guys just didn't notice because I was wearing jeans or sweatpants or whatever the case. This is the deal, though. Tom Brady, wide receiver, still a big issue. Okay. Edelman is the only one who can catch the ball, and that little bastard catches the ball like 50 times a game.
Yeah, it's freaking
So
awesome.
that's good. Amendola got a hangnail. He's already out for the season. We know that. Okay.
You guys were so big on him last year, for the record, and I was like, absolutely not. I am not touching him.
Well, Gronk is currently hurt, Jimmer. He has had literally like 8 surgeries since his career. He had a wrist like twice. He had a back, which he's had, I think, twice. He's coming off ACL, MCL, RCL, KCL, and MCL. And
pool partyitis.
Pool partyitis. He got hepatitis in the pool. That's clear.
Cool.
So he's always an issue. You know, is he going to be on the pup list going in the season? I don't know. Probably he was last year. I traded for him with Cushman. I couldn't play him for 6 weeks because of it. He's always a problem and an issue. When he's on the field, he's incredible, but he's off the field a lot. So this is the thing with Brady. Lowest completage percentage in yards per attempt for him was last year since 2004 is when that occurred. That's how bad it was last year. And yes, a lot of that is because of his wide receiver issues and the fact that Gronk is rarely on the field. You know, all the numbers went the wrong way. He finished as the 16th quarterback in our league, and because of how he screwed me, I want nothing to do with him. He is getting older. He does have a great offensive line. That's fine. Aaron Dobson, just for those, who actually might be listening here live, Aaron Dobson is someone to target. He's a late round guy. You probably get him in the 15th round. I think he will make an impact and do better than he did last year. But I am staying far and away from Tom Brady. I have him at 13 because I have a personal vendetta, just like clearly Jimmer has on RG3. But his peak has passed. He's on the downside of his career, and I am frankly staying away from him, and that's just the bottom line. So that wraps it up as far as QBs go. We're going to do a quick some tight ends here. Again, we're not going to discuss the big tight ends. There's no reason to talk about Jimmy Graham. Everyone knows he's a beast. Everyone knows he's the top guy off the board. Julius Thomas, beast. Jordan Cameron, Vernon Davis, beast. Draft them, sleep like a baby, feel good about it. But let's talk about the guys kind of in the middle segment. What changes have happened at offensive coordinator? How many catches do we think they might get this year in this offense, so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and start and talk about somebody that I am pretty high on. This is one Mr. Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen is currently ADP in PPR leagues going 8th tight end off the board. You can get him close to the end of the 7th round. I have him at 5. Greg Olsen had 73 receptions last year for over 800 yards, 6 touchdowns in 2013. That made him the 7th best tight end of last season. He was 5th in targets. That's obviously, we covered the fact that Cam Newton had no one to throw the ball to, so it's not a big surprise he was 5th in targets. But again, his wide receivers haven't, exactly increased all that much. So 5th in targets last year, I see that to be at least the same, if not better. He was also 6th in reception, so he's not only getting the targets, he's actually catching the ball. And he was 6th in receiving yards for tight ends. Those are all very good things. He caught over 66% of those targets. That's better than Jimmy Graham. That's better than Gronkowski when he actually played the 6 or 8 games that he actually played in. So the guy is very good. He gets a lot of targets. He catches the ball at a high rate. He's really the only legitimate target for Cam. I think we've covered that. Steve Smith, like we said, is gone. He's got some guys like Cotchery and Jason Avant and so forth, and a rookie there. So I think he's going to rely on Greg Olsen quite a bit. That's why I have him above ADP, and I have him in the top 5. I think his targets will go up from the 117 that they were last year, and they will go up from the 73 receptions that he had. Remember, Steve Smith is gone, and Steve Smith, even though he was older and he's 3'9", and he would just assume punch you in the face as look at you, he accounted for 115 targets last year, and now he is gone. Those targets have to go somewhere, and with Cotchery and Benjamin and Jason Avant, I think the good money is on the fact that Greg Olsen is probably going to get a larger percentage of those 115 targets in general. So I see him as getting close to 80 catches, 850 yards or so. I see his touchdowns going up into the 8-9 range for 2014, and I see him as a solid top 5 tight end that you can get currently in ADP at the end of the 7th round.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said earlier, I don't think Cam's going to have a great year, but if he's going to be throwing the ball, this is pretty much the only guy he's going to be throwing the ball to that has any consistency. He's going to get a lot of targets. PPR leagues, I think Greg Olsen is definitely going to be a beast. So I've got him at 6, and I would definitely confidently draft him as my starting tight end for sure. Jim?
Yeah, I think he's going to get 1,000 yards, quite frankly, and so I think you're a little low on that projection. Dude catches the ball, is not great run after catch, but he's a great target, and he's definitely, in my opinion, going to break into that top 5 category, so that's why I'm very big on him this year.
Okay. All right, we're going to talk about Jordan Reed, another very polarizing tight end figure in the NFL. And that, guys, again, listeners, that's the reason we chose these guys. They're question marks for everybody. We don't know what to do with them. Are they high? They're obviously high risk reward. do we say screw it, or it's not worth the risk because of their injury history and so forth? But Jordan Reed had an incredible start to the season, had some concussion issues. His ADP is currently 7th in PPR league, so people are still having some confidence in him, I guess, thinking the offseason heals up his concussions and he may not, have them again or whatever the case. But, you can draft him in the early 7th round. Cushman, Jay, you've got him at 5th. I'm a little less bullish on him because of the concussion scenario. I've got him at 7. Jimmer also has him actually at 6. So Jay, why do you have him at 5? And are you just not concerned that his concussion issues are going to plague him throughout the next season?
Well, that's the thing. If this guy keeps his brain from sloshing around in his head for a little while, he's easily a top 5 tight end. In 2013, obviously he finished the season on injured reserve, but if we look at 9 games that started, prior to that, he caught 45 balls for 499 yards, had 3 touchdowns. Now that's an average of 11.1 yards per reception. That's pretty damn good. The 45 receptions that he had were on 59 targets, which means Reed actually caught 76% of the passes thrown his way, which is better than Graham, better than Gronk, and even better than the last guy we talked about, Greg Olsen. It's a smaller, piece that you're looking at, but just perspective on that number, Gronk had 60%, and Graham had 58%. So I think he's going to be really good with 16 games under his belt if he can stay healthy. So, and then beyond Deshaun Jackson, Pierre Garçon, Washington doesn't really have much in the way of receiving threats. So Reed will definitely be heavily featured in the offense. I think he's got the full offseason to recover. RG3 is going to be back healthy under center, so I think you look for Reed to flourish this year in Washington. Some people are worried about drafting him too early, but I think he's an elite tight end heading into 2014. So definitely, don't sleep on this guy because he's going to be somebody that's going to put up points for sure.
Well, Jay, let me ask you this before Jimmer comes in on this. And is Jordan Reed? Obviously you have him at 5th. If you pick up Jordan Reed, you draft him somewhere in the 7th round or whatnot, because of your still the concerns of his concussions, are you definitely going to backfill that with a tight end like a Delaney Walker or somebody in later rounds, or are you just going to stick with him and then pick someone up off waivers down the season if necessary?
I would most likely draft somebody late, but I probably wouldn't. If there was nobody there that I really liked, I wouldn't be against waiting and seeing who's doing well off the waiver wires and grabbing somebody there. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to backfill. The guy does have brain sloshy issues.
Yeah, Jimmer, what are your thoughts on Reed? Is it somebody you'd risk drafting, or are you just staying away from him altogether?
I think he's absolutely draftable. I think he's going to be well worth the draft pick wherever he falls. If he falls into your lap in a later round, he's absolutely draftable, and he's the kind of guy I think he's going to play the full season this year. So I think you don't need to streamline him with another guy, in my opinion. So.
Okay. Well, for me, this is the thing. I've got him lower than everybody else, but granted, it's at 7. You guys have him at like 5 and 6, so it's not ridiculous. The thing is about Jordan Reed, we made jokes about, which I don't know if it was necessarily funny or not, when we talked about, last night he just laid his head on his pillow and got a concussion. But the reality is he has significant concussion history. And he was a rookie last year, guys, and this wasn't just from last year that he had multiple concussions. He had this back in college. Some guys do not respond well. Not that people respond well to concussions, but some people can heal from them. Some people are more affected by them. Some people take longer to heal from them. That is just a fact that we have seen, and that's what makes me nervous about Jordan Reed. It has nothing to do with his talent, because clearly he's talented. Jordan Reed was on pace last season to be one of the most productive rookie tight ends of all time. Yes, of all time. That's how good he was in that offense, and that's with an RG3 that was struggling. So the guy is gifted. He's talented. There's no question about it. But he has these concussion issues, And that's what concerns me, like it concerns me with Gronk and all his injuries. So to me, Jordan Reed is the ultimate risk-reward tight end. Depending on how your strategy is, depending if you're, an aggressive player, you want to, put all your money in the bank on Jordan Reed and draft him in the 7th or whatever the case. I think he's risk-reward. For me personally, if he does fall to me and I get him in a spot that I think it's good value, I in all likelihood probably will back him up, because at some point I think it's probably, unfortunately for him, inevitable that he's going to miss quite a few games, and I'm going to feel better if I have somebody to back him up. But that's just my opinion. But it's unfortunate because the guy's obviously a clear talent. So we're going to move on to another guy who broke out last season, another clearly gifted tight end, and this is one Mr. Charles Clay. Charles Clay, current ADP is 14. He's going off the board in 12-man leagues at the beginning of the 12th round. Jimmer, you have him at 14th. Looking where, we've got him kind of in similar areas. I've got him at 12. Jay, I'm trying to look. You've got him at 14. So we're all about in that ballpark. What do you think about Charles Clay? Do you think he can continue to break out, or is the competition that he now has there going to hinder him, and he's going to have that sophomore slump that everyone talks about?
Well, he's not going to have a sophomore slump because he's already been through that sophomore slump. He honestly, his first 3 years with the Dolphins, he quite frankly was irrelevant. He played like crap. He wasn't talented as far as anyone's concerned. And actually last year he kind of came out of nowhere, quite frankly. And he caught just almost 800 yards and he got 6 TDs. That is remarkable. All right. Did not see this guy coming out of anywhere, and obviously that puts him, quite frankly, just in that cusp of top 10 numbers for tight ends. He is in a contract year, which I think is a huge deal. New management, the Miami Brass, they're looking to lock him up probably in midseason, and it's going to be based on his performance if he starts strong. So I think he's very viable drafting. I would definitely have him tethered with another guy, in my opinion, but I think he's very draftable. Basically, the general fantasy consensus says that he's better than his 14th tight end drafting pick. So what that tells me there is that, hey, maybe there's something more to him than what we thought. I think if you got a guy like Gronk, this is somebody you're going to want to have as your tether guy and just have him for a rock consistency. The nearly 70 receptions is something I found very interesting. PPR, that's a huge deal. In a traditional pro set offense that they're in, and they don't really have any sort of gimmicks, so to speak, because they're kind of boring, quite frankly. This guy could be a real breakthrough and real gem in that. But do you want to risk, drafting a top 5 tight end and wait and take a gamble on a guy like this? I don't know. I mean, that's just up for your own opinions. But he's somebody, and Jay, I mean, back me up on this. I mean, if this is something where you don't get one of the top 5, guys, aka not Jimmy Graham guys, but really close to Jimmy Graham guys, is this a guy that you're going to want to draft a second tight end for, or are you going to just pick up a second tight end off the waiver if you get this guy?
Yeah, I would definitely. This guy would be somebody I would have to have another tight end with. I don't trust him. Not a real big believer in Miami's offense per se. Anyway, I'm going to probably be staying away from most of the guys that are down there. I would definitely want to have somebody to back this guy up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he was so relevant his rookie year, I thought he was a sophomore. But, Clay, people forget about this guy, but this was a waiver wire wonder last year. I mean, people picked him up all over the place. The guy, at least in our scoring in PPR, he finished 7th last year, and he was clearly a favorite of Ryan Tannehill in that offense. And, I mean, Ryan Tannehill got sacked more than any other quarterback in the NFL, so I think it was just, get the ball in the shotgun that gives me an extra second and a half, and I need to throw it within half a second before I'm on my back. So I think that may be part of why Clay had so many receptions. So, I really don't know what to think of the guy. He's not somebody that I'm necessarily targeting. I think this would be a streaming approach again if I'm going to take that route with tight ends. I mean, their offensive line, dear God, it can't get any worse. And guys who have bad offensive lines, like we saw last year with Tannehill, they do rely heavily on their tight end. So I think he can put up some production for you. But to rely on him as your tight end one, even in a 12-man league, that's it's going to be sketchy and risky at best.
Yeah, that's what we would call ballsy. But we'll move on now to another guy that probably wouldn't be so ballsy to have as your number one tight end. I've actually got him at 8. His 8 is 9th. Rob, you also have him at 8. That's Dennis Pitta. So wow us with the tales of Dennis Pitta.
Dennis Pitta, yeah. Like you said, ADP 9th. He's going at the kind of towards the early and middle part of the 8th round. I've got him at 8th as well as you, Cushman. I don't know if let's see.
I got him at 9.
Okay, so we're all right in that same ballpark. He had a right hip fracture / dislocation injury, which doesn't make any sense to me because if it's, can it be fractured and dislocated, or if it's fractured, you're just fucked from the get-go? I don't really know, but that's what the verbiage said. So, but anyway, but given that injury, it allowed him to only play the final 4 games of last season. But in those 4 games, he put up 20 catches, which is 5 per game. PPR, that's not bad, especially for a tight end by any means. He put up 169 yards, and a touchdown. So he played pretty well, especially given the fact that he was coming off of this hip fracture. In 2012, the year prior, he only started in 5 games, but he played in all 16. He put up 61 receptions for 669 yards, 7 touchdowns, ranking him as 7th in PPR in tight end at that season. So he has a history of being a top 10 tight end, somebody that you can count on, especially if you want to wait on somebody and not get one of the upper echelon guys. The Ravens signed Pitta to a 5-year, $32 million deal in this offseason, so clearly they are not concerned with his hip fracture / dislocation scenario. He's very important to that team. They don't have a plethora of wide receivers to go to outside of Torrey Smith. And if you've watched them, Pitta is Flacco's go-to guy. I mean, there's no denying it. I mean, he comes back from freaking hip fracture surgery and he gets 5 catches a game. I mean, Flacco looks for him early and often. Like I said, other than him, you've just got Torrey Smith and Jacoby Jones essentially. So they did just acquire 40-year-old Steve Smith. I don't know how much he's gonna add to that offense. I mean, he's a feisty guy. He's going to get some catches. He's going to throw some punches. We all know that. But at the end of the day, Dennis Pitta is going to be good value. He's going to put up numbers. He's going to do well for you in a tight end 1 position, especially if you want to wait till the 7th or later rounds to get him. So at the end of the day, I see him getting, upwards of 70 receptions, about 700 yards, 6 or so touchdowns. Especially because the running back situation there is a cluster. I mean, who the hell knows Ray Rice and his issues, how he's going to perform. In all likelihood, he's going to be suspended. I honestly think he's going to get anywhere from 2 to 4 games. I think I would bet a couch shot on that right now. We've seen that before from the commissioner. It doesn't have to be a legal situation for him to put down a suspension, especially the fact that it was on videotape. He will be suspended, in my opinion. Bernard Pierce, again, the offensive line was horrendous, but Bernard Pierce put up even worse numbers than Ray Rice did when he was in there. So the running game is crap. He's going to rely on his main target, which is Dennis Pitta. He's going to put up good yards and good numbers and good receptions for you, especially in a PPR. So feel very comfortable picking him in the 7th, 8th round. ADP 9th as your, 8th, 7th, whatever, tight end going into 2014.
Yeah, I agree. I think the lack of other targets there makes Dennis Pitta somebody that I'll be looking at as my tight end. And any fantasy squad I'm playing on this year, I'll definitely be looking into him and interested.
So Jimmer, is Pitta somebody that you would target and look at and feel comfortable with starting?
I agree.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Good.
All right, so we got a couple more guys to talk about. Kyle Rudolph, ADP 10th off the board of PPR, going at the beginning of the 9th round. When I think of Kyle Rudolph, I think of I don't know about you guys, but I think of a 10-foot tall white guy who catches red zone targets. I mean, maybe that's just me. That's how I think of him. But he's going into kind of a new situation with some new coordinators there. A lot of people are very high on him, which would mean that his value is very good, and he'll probably outproduce his value. Currently, it's at 10. I think that's going to creep up. Jay, you currently have him as 9th. I have him as 9th. Jimmer has him as 10th. What do you think about Kyle Rudolph in this Minnesota offense and what he can bring with him? They clearly, their wide receivers aren't exactly, what we're looking at in Chicago. So what do you think Kyle Rudolph can do for them next year or this year?
Well, when you think about the Minnesota Vikings, there's only really one name that comes to mind for most people. It's Adrian Peterson. Guess what? Most of the defenses they play, that's who they're thinking about too. So it leaves Kyle Rudolph a nice opening. I think he caught a huge break when they brought in Norm Turner to be the offensive coordinator. Everywhere this guy goes, the tight ends that he coached have gone on to huge seasons. We got Antonio Gates, Jordan Cameron, are two examples of that. Both of these tight ends have been great weapons for the team, and I think Rudolph is the next guy in line to be blessed by the magic that is Norm Turner. Rudolph's not unfamiliar himself with catching touchdowns. In 2012, he caught 9. He went on to his only Pro Bowl appearance of his career that year. He had injuries in 2013, so that cut his season short, and it kind of hurt his fantasy value a little bit because people kind of forgot about him. I'm not saying to look for this guy to be the big yardage guy that a Jimmy Graham is, but I think he can catch more than 10 touchdowns in 2014. I think he's a player you can grab later in your fantasy drafts and start the entire season with this guy. He's going to be a main target, I think, for Matt Schaub or Matt Castle, sorry, or whoever ends up, or Christian Ponder, whoever starts there in Minnesota this year.
Yeah, and I think that would be Teddy Bridgewater, in my opinion. What do you think, Jimmer, on Kyle Rudolph going into the season?
I feel good about him. I think he's going to have a great year. Honestly, nothing negative or bad to say about him, quite frankly. I think he's very draftable, and I think he's going to, without a doubt, be a top 10 guy because he's the first check down guy. So.
Yeah, and Jay, I think you nailed it. There's not much to add here. Norm Turner, he's known for that. Kyle Rudolph is a beast in the red zone. I think in addition to the red zone skills that he clearly already possesses, I think he's going to get more catches. Jimmer, I can't believe you didn't mention Cordell Patterson. I don't even know what to do. I feel like we should pause the podcast and start over.
Yeah, we may need to re-examine our values.
I just want to say Cordell Patterson, support Cordell Patterson.
Yeah, there you go.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah, that is an approved message by the Jimmer. All right, so we all agree on Kyle Rudolph. Again, great value. I don't think you would need to necessarily back him up again with anybody else. I think people are sleeping on him, but I absolutely believe that his ADP is going to creep up from what it is currently as we get closer to fantasy drafts in mid to late August. So, all right, so we're going to move on to one Mr. Delaney Walker. We kind of briefly touched on him. This is kind of a deeper guy, with somebody that I personally believe definitely has some fantasy value, and especially in 10, 12-man leagues. He's currently, the guy's getting no love. He's going 21st off the board. This is a backup guy, a second tight end, even if you want to draft a second tight end in 10 and 12-man leagues, going in the early 13th round. Jimmer has him at 22nd, so pretty much straight up where the ADP is going. So Jimmer, this was a guy, he peaked at certain spots last year. He definitely flashed. Guys grabbed him, they used him. He did well for him in certain weeks. He was kind of hit and miss. What do you think about his potential and his consistency potentially for 2014?
Well, I mean, let's go through, do a quick history lesson for everyone. Delanie Walker was kind of, he was a fan favorite. Everyone loved him in San Francisco, but he basically had 7 borderline, I'll say it, borderline useless, because he wasn't quite useless, but he always made the plays, and he was always part of the right play, and so everyone loved him in San Francisco. He didn't really become relevant until he landed in with the Flaming Thumbtacks, a.k.a. That is Tennessee Titans, Jay, just so you know. His 60 catches and 600 yards and 6 TDs, I feel like a lot of sixes were in there, really kind of changed his whole value, because quite frankly, he was more or less used as a fullback for, as far as San Francisco is concerned. So with all that change, and Jay, you kind of mentioned Norv Turner and their use of tight ends. Ken Weisenhunt, who actually was part of that and was the offensive coordinator there for the Chargers, again, he was the guy that kind of helped develop Antonio Gates. So he was very big on him. And he kind of said, hey, we, see him, being a bigger part of the game plan. That definitely increases his value. Right now, everyone's saying that he'll outperform his 28th drafted tight end position. And I think so, but about how much, I really don't know. He's a guy that you got to tether. I mean, if you're going to draft, someone, like Kyle Rudolph, you probably don't need to tether someone. But if you're going to draft, some lower-end tight ends and kind of avoid them and risk going for more wide receivers or whatnot, then he's something there. One of the big things I have and I'm very concerned about is who the hell's throwing to him. I mean, I couldn't tell you who's going to be the starting quarterback. I mean, Jake Locker, if he's healthy, maybe. Who's in the backfields? Who's the wide receivers again? Like, there's a lot of questions just in general, and I'm really questioning the Titans as a whole offensively, so that's my big thing. I think age is a huge factor here. This is year 9 for him. So I think he is a candidate for IR, so I would definitely be hesitant drafting him, and I think he's something you can find off the waiver. So that's me. Any other consolations, thoughts, guys?
Yeah, I'm just going to stay away from this guy. Somebody else wants to play streaming with their tight ends. With this guy, they can. You mentioned, that they were going to use him more, but does he have the talent really for them to do that? I just don't see it. I've got him at 22nd, which is right where his ADP is, I believe, and that's where he'll stay. I probably won't even touch this guy. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm a little higher on him than you guys are. I've actually got him at 14. Maybe I should be flogged for that. I'm not sure yet.
Absolutely.
I guess
Absolutely.
time will tell.
Your love for old people is sick.
Yeah, minus Brady. So, last year, his numbers did jump last year, guys. I don't know if you're looking at, granted he's in his 9th season or whatnot, but his receptions went up like by 300%. He had almost 600 yards. He had every number that we give a rip about in fantasy went up considerably. And as you mentioned, Jimmer, they don't have a whole lot of other options there to throw the ball to. I've got him at 14th. He's not a guy that I'm going to draft as my tight end 1 because clearly he's outside of 10 or 12, and that's the largest leagues that I play in. I think he is a streaming guy. You probably can get him off waivers unless you have multiple guys in your leagues that draft more than one tight end. But I think he can definitely flash for you. I think he's a fantastic guy to play on your starting tight ends bye week. If you're in a 2-flex league and you're having some bye week issues, I think you could plug him in there and get some good production. So I'm not going to just completely – I don't think he's irrelevant. I think he is relevant, but I think he's a late-round pick or at least someone to pick up off waivers and keep an eye on. So we'll kind of end the conversation on Delanie Walker there. So the last guy we're going to talk about in today's show, and there's 2 reasons we're going to talk about this guy. One is because the Cushman said he was going to punch me if we didn't. And secondly, because he was the Lions' number 1 pick in the NFL draft, and that is one Mr. Eric Ebron. This guy it's interesting. I mean, like I said, tight ends typically do not do well in year one. A lot of it's a product of their offense. But like I mentioned before with Jordan Reed was on a historic year before he got his concussion issues, or I should say they continued for him. So Jay, ADP, I don't know if this is hype because of the draft, because he was a first-round pick. You know, I don't know if it's because it's so early in the period or what, but the reality is over thousands of mock drafters, he's being drafted as 11th as of today in 12-man leagues, late in the 9th round. I'm not a believer of this, nothing personal against him, but just because he's a rookie tight end. You've got him at 10. I've got him at 18. And actually, Jimmer, wow, you've got him at 11. So, our resident Lions fan, the Cushman, state your case for one Mr. Eric Ebron going into 2014.
All right, well, first I have to say I accidentally muted the Jimmer and cannot unmute him. So, Jim, be patient. Anyway, Eric Ebron, however you want to say it. The Lions recently stated they want to use him similar to how the Saints use Jimmy Graham. Big surprise there. No, it's not a big surprise. The guy's an athletic weapon. He operates out of the slot. It makes sense. You know, the new offensive coordinator has done a few seasons with the Saints and is quite familiar with Jimmy Graham, so that's a good thing for us Lions fans, I think. During his final year at the University of North Carolina, Ebron lined up 71% of the time. You know, he's not a good blocker, so it's logical that this guy's just going to be a wide receiver, basically, for the Lions, and I think he's going to see a lot of targets. He's going to be used similar to the way Norv Turner used Cameron last year with the Browns. Actually, the only tight end to line up in the slot more than Cameron last year was the great Tony Gonzalez. So this guy, he's just going to be a wide receiver. Like I said, wide receiver. That's what you got to think of him as. Draft him as a tight end, stick him in there. He's going to be top 10. According to Pro Football Focus, Stafford actually targets his tight end about 25% of the time over his career, which is above the league average of 20%. Guy's going to be top 10. If you can get him late in the 11th round, I say go for it and run with it. Back to you, Rob. I'm going to see if I can unmute Jim so he can add to my victory on this point.
Okay. You know, damn, Eric Ebron, again, I'm just not going to be the guy to pull the trigger on him, and clearly you're in a lot of my drafts, and you're a Detroit homer, and you're going to pick him well before I ever would, so I don't really have to come across this issue except for leagues that we're not in together or we're actually playing together. So, you know, I just, you know, Pettigrew's still there. They signed Pettigrew to a 2 or 3 year deal just this offseason. They may or may not regret doing that. I don't know clearly if they had Ebron in mind at that point. They decided to draft him in the first round so early, but I think he's I mean, from what I've seen, he's got all the potential in the world. I have no doubt about that. I think this is one of the best offenses a tight end could have landed, because even though they signed Pettigrew, the guy has hands of stone, as we have seen time in and time again. You know, with Calvin Johnson there, the guy's going to be open. There's a lot of hype around, and it's legit, frankly, around this Detroit offense, which as much as they throw the ball, adding Golden Tate, that's just going to, you know, open up things in the middle for a tight end who can catch the ball, and all intents and purposes, this guy can. So I think he's okay. I think Jimmer's back. So
Rob, let me chime in real quick on this. Stafford's going to throw for 5,000 yards this year. So this kid's going to see some looks. I think this first year it's a little tough to say what he's going to do. I'm more drafting him on potential. I think he could end up being a fantasy keeper.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I would definitely not draft him as my tight end one in a 10 or 12 man league for sure. If you're in like a deep 16, 18, whatever, and you want to wait on tight ends and take that risk reward scenario, absolutely go for it. You know, I think he will be drafted in most leagues because of the hype around him. I'm not saying it's not legit. I just see him doing this in year 2 and 3, and not necessarily a year 1, and that's just kind of where I stand at that. It'll be interesting to see how his ADP changes from now as we get closer to the actual fantasy season. So, all right, guys. Well, that wraps it up for our quarterbacks and tight ends for this podcast. On our next show, we are actually working to put together a 10 to 12 man or woman, for that matter, mock draft. Hopefully sometime next Thursday. We're going to have a good group of fantasy football degenerates such as ourselves to do a live on the air and discuss our picks as we pick them, our rationale and mentality about why we picked a guy where and what our thinking process is for doing so. So I don't know about you guys, but when I listen to podcasts, that's one of the favorite things I listen to is mock drafts and listening to why these guys do what they do. So go ahead and look out for that. We'll definitely keep you posted via Twitter for when that is going to be done. You can watch it live on YouTube and then when we're going to be releasing that. But again, we're hoping to do that this coming Thursday. In the meantime, go to redzonewarriors.com. You can watch all of our previous episodes. You can see our rankings. You can subscribe to the show via iTunes. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Tweet us your fantasy football questions at Red Zone Warriors. So for the Cushman, the Jimmer, I am Rob Smith. And remember, if you are taking a fantasy football season off, then you are already losing. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
I'm drafting QBs in the first 3 rounds.